Greetings, Grenfell fam. It's a wonderful bank holiday Monday, and welcome to another Grenfell MediaWatch update. This week's episode is going to be called Retro Regrets. Now, what do I mean by retro regrets? I'm going to start straight off with right at the top of the government. Last week there was a private meeting with the Prime Minister and the Grenfell families where they discussed a lot of things that went wrong. Theresa May actually acknowledged the fact that the local council were very slow to respond, and what we've seen as a result of that is that the tenant management organisation, the TMO, has actually been stripped of its powers with all things to do with Grenfell. Now, this is a good development. The council itself, this is Elizabeth and her team, they've actually now come to realisation that what they're going to have to do is spend something in the sum of tens of millions of pounds to actually buy properties to house the Grenfell families.
So it's a lot of money, tens of millions of pounds, but that's what that money is there for. You know, we were known as a very competent council. We built up reserves and we built them up because in case of emergencies, and this is an emergency.
Let's see what happens there. I mean, over £6 million has been spent on temporary housing, hotel bills. So using tens of millions to actually find accommodation makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Wish it could have been done earlier. Okay, also talking about retro regrets, we also have the LFB, the London Fire Brigade. They're actually saying that the government's not doing enough with regard to safety of white goods, and I'm talking about things like tumble dryers, dishwashers, etc. There was a fire in Shepherd's Bush and no one passed away, but over 100 families were evacuated. So what should have happened since then, and it hasn't, this happened last year, is that when there's a product recall needed, that there'd be a national unified response. There hasn't been one. So who else has regrets when it comes to Grenfell? Well, Jon Snow was talking at the McTaggart lecture, which takes place at the Edinburgh Festival for TV Executives every year. And he made a really, really powerful speech. One of the things he was talking about is how the media has actually become disconnected from the plight of those that they report on.
We are too far removed from those who lived their lives in Grenfell and who, across the country, now live on amid combustible cladding, the lack of sprinklers, the absence of centralised fire alarms and more revealed by the Grenfell Tower.
I've got a lot of time for Channel 4, especially Jon Snow. They've done some cutting-edge journalism, and their response towards Grenfell has been as it should be, scientific tests. They're doing what the government should be doing, really, when it comes to investigative approach and putting pressure on those who are culpable. But Jon Snow's comments were excellent. He makes a point about sometimes feeling haunted by what's happening with Grenfell and the lack of response. And actually, it makes me think about this new announcement from the BBC, which was made at the same time, that they're going to make two documentaries, one on the Stephen Lawrence case and one on Grenfell. But I always have a problem when BBC gets involved in political issues like this, because then what happens with its huge amounts of resources, the BBC documentary becomes the national narrative. It becomes a story that people see the whole situation through. So the voices that they choose to include and exclude shape how people memorise what's happening. And we know with Grenfell, one of the things that's kept this topic in the agenda, that's kept the politicians on their toes, is simply that social media. Okay, so I've talked about some of the regrets when it comes to Grenfell. Let's talk about some of the positives. Well, like I said, it's a bank holiday today, and we know at Notting Hill Carnival, it was launched with a tribute, white doves, multi-faith ceremony, and this is good. And it shouldn't have even been questioned, it should happen. There's also been a 3-minute silence, and I hear that was on Sunday. I hear today on Monday there's going to be another one at 3 o'clock, and again it's good. It makes me want to comment on the fact that as an anthropologist, and yes, I'm an activist, I'm an artist, but I'm also an anthropologist, there was this really great article talking about the role that forensic anthropology could have had in identifying some of the bodies after the massacre. It's very true. There's a need for rituals, there's a need for people-centred investigative approach to identify those who were there, because the people know who were there. I mean, you might have a number of 80, which has really been done through DNA, etc. But there are other clues, other means to find out who was actually present. And And I think as long as that number stays in the 80s, there's always going to be a distrust. There's always going to be an understanding that the authorities never quite gets it. So I think I've covered everything for this special edition. Probably tell I'm not in London right now. It's beautiful out here. But we must never forget that even in Carnival, while people are celebrating and remembering, there's those that can't. They're in the ancestral realm, through no fault of their own, before their time. I think there was a baby who's been one of the youngest identified as one of the victims of the massacre. So, yes, we can recharge right now, but we've got work to do. So as ever, I'm going to sign off and say, may the ancestors continue to guide and protect us. Ashe.